Good morning, America, and welcome back to Fan 13 Food Action Network. I'm your host, Deborah Chesterfield, reporting to you live from Pasadena, California on this lovely sunny Saturday in 1980. We've gotten hundreds of requests and letters asking us to bring a special guest on set with us today. Sitting just backstage is our very own Julia Child. Now, for those of you who don't know, beginning in the 1960s, Julia Child inspired American chefs with her contribution of the French cuisine and culture to America. Not only that, but she created an uproar with her book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, and created a rise in cooking shows all across America. By diminishing the status quo, who needs to cook, Julia Child truly was able to bring home the bacon. Now the real question is, what did she do that everyone else didn't? I guess we'll all have to find out. Please help me welcome the talented Julia Child.
Why, hello, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor to have you here on the show today, Julia.
Now that I'm getting much older, it's nice to come on down and have a chat.
Oh, Julia, you don't look a day over 15.
68, actually, dear. I was born in 1912, but I still got it.
You sure do. Alrighty, well, I have a series of questions for you before we move on to part 2.
Ask away.
First question, how did you know you wanted to get into cooking?
Well, to be quite honest, I didn't know I wanted to get into cooking until my husband, Paul, took a position in the U.S. Foreign Service and was sent to France in 1948. I never realized it would have taken such a huge impact on my life.
How so?
Well, I always loved food. Eating is one of my most favorite hobbies. Am I right, everybody?
You're right.
I still remember the first French meal I had. We sat down at this beautiful restaurant, La Couronne in Rouen, and let me tell you, it was the most exciting meal of my life.
Interesting. So how did you know you wanted to get into cooking school?
About 1 year later, I decided to join the cooking school, the Cordon Bleu, and I still remember my mentor, Max Bougnard. He was amazing. But I was first placed into the housewife class, and I knew it wasn't for me, but I was unqualified for the experts class. I eventually was placed in a year-long program for professional restaurateurs.
How many students were there? Did you like it?
There were 11 men, if I remember correctly. I was the only woman, but definitely, as I said, my mentor, Max Bougnard, he was very inspiring, and I definitely felt successful under his instruction.
Well, he sounds inspiring, most definitely. So how did the end of the program go? Did you complete it?
Yes, I did complete it in 1951. The first time I failed my exam, but the second time around I got my diploma and decided to make a career out of it.
Well, congratulations on your success. It's all about perseverance, which you had indeed. I know you have a surprise for us in store in the kitchen.
Before I move on, I want to say I didn't really think that my career would have taken off so quickly like it did. You know, nobody was interested in cooking, and I knew I had to find some way to get them interested in the French cuisine. Now, this was about the same time where I met Simone Beck, and she was in the same position I was, so we basically became sisters. But the more and more I got myself out there to the American public and to the audience, more people were buying my book and watching my television shows, and they were taking an interest in French cuisine.
Well, once again, really congratulations on your success. You worked hard and you definitely earned it. Now, there is a surprise in store for us in the kitchen.
Yes, you'll just follow me.
No problem.
Now, this is one of my most favorite French dishes to make. It's very simple. It's called ratatouille. Super easy. All you need is a couple ingredients, some eggplant, zucchini, and of course some butter.
Wow, it sounds delicious and it doesn't smell too bad either. To be quite honest, I always thought the French cuisine was all about the snails.
That's a common stereotype. If only people just understood and knew how much variety there was in the French cuisine, maybe they would have taken an interest much earlier.
Well, I can tell you, us Americans do base most of our knowledge on stereotypes. Moving on, I have a couple more questions for you.
I'm an open book. Go ahead.
Speaking of books, I know that you released one back in 1961.
Ah, yes. Mastering the Art of French Cooking was definitely a delight to finally get published.
Finally? Was it difficult to publish?
We had to get it sent back multiple times as it was too long and confusing, according to our editor. It was really frustrating because I really wanted to get it out to the American audience, considering I was the only American influence they would receive from the book.
You seemed really anxious to put this book out. Why is that?
Well, I wanted to teach my audience, or anyone that wanted to get in the kitchen, that anybody can cook, despite them thinking they didn't have any reason to.
Makes sense. Now, you say we in your book. Who else was included in this collaboration?
Well, it was a team of 3 people that were actually creating the book. It was me, Simone Beck, and Louisette Berthaud.
Interesting. Now, did this group originally come together after cooking school, or how did it play out?
Well, Actually, one of their team members had died during the creation of the book, and shortly after I graduated, I met Simone after that had happened, rest in peace. But they told me they were looking for an American collaborator, so we sat down, we had a meeting, and decided to open our own cooking school, L'École de Trois Gourmands, and we started to work on our book.
The food is burning, it's burning!
Oh, ooh, that's too bad. It's not that big of a deal. You see, that right there is one of the things I wanted to teach my American audience. You can create anything out of a mistake. And I think that was one of the big things that many of the other TV hosts didn't. They just forgot to emphasize that in their cooking shows.
Did you incorporate this attitude into your cooking show?
Yes, of course. That was one of my main focuses. People need to learn how to cook and purposely practice it as an art, not learn it as a chore. Trust me, would you rather be folding buckets of laundry or creating a delicious creme brulee?
Let me tell you, I'd much rather be creating a creme brulee, considering how much laundry my kids make for me.
Yeah, and I also try to incorporate different things into my cooking shows, such as competition with other chefs and purposely burning the food, and use those ways as a way to teach my audience all the importance of incorporating different varieties into your cooking style.
The fun was the hook that got them to watch in the first place, wasn't it?
You bet it is. And that's what separated me from other cooking TV hosts. The way I presented myself and how to have fun with cooking.
Well, I can definitely say I'd be one of your watchers. Now, can we dig in? I mean, the food is a little bit burned, but I'm sure it still tastes amazing.
Let's do it.
All right. Whew, I'm stuffed. But before we leave, I do want to hear your take on things. I know I speak for myself and everybody else in this room when I say, speech, speech, speech.
All right, settle down. All right. Now, I want you all to imagine this. Have you ever wondered what life would be like without butter? Dry mashed potatoes, plain popcorn at the movies, never a chance to enjoy a decadent croissant. Life itself is the proper binge. The only time you should be eating diet food is while you're waiting for the steak to cook. Now, with all this in mind, I try displaying myself on my television shows in a way that other TV hosts don't. It's probably the reason why so many Americans got interested in French cuisine. But I bring my ideas in a way that's fun and easy, and make sure to keep my viewers watching throughout the entire episode, never switching channels, even during commercials.
Oh, you sly croissant, you! As David Lee did say, you made French cooking very approachable.
I do try. You don't have to cook complicated or fancy masterpieces, just good food from fresh ingredients. And I also try incorporating a couple things into my cooking shows, including competition, new techniques, some fun, and definitely my bubbly personality.
What is one last thing you have to say to your viewers?
Find something you're interested in, and keep tremendously interested in it. I found my passion, and now it's your turn.
Wonderful job, Julia, wonderful job. And cut. Great job, Julia, you did an amazing job. Honestly, I know for a fact you won't be forgotten. By diminishing the status quo, Who Needs to Cook, you truly are an incredible legacy and will be never forgotten for years to come. Now, I think we need to take another take. Pretty sure the food is burning again.
Oh, well, that happens. When is take two happening? I need to fluff my hair. Andy, hair check! Take it easy.
You want to start?
Sure.
How did you decide that this was the way you wanted to present Julia Child's story?
Well, Julia Child did many things in her life, including interviews, cooking shows, and just, speaking to her audience. So we decided to incorporate all of those things into one by placing it into 3 different categories of having the interview, doing a little cooking segment, and then finally giving a speech.
And that was also how we decided to do a performance, because we felt like doing a documentary or website wouldn't really live up to the fact of how she carried on her legacy. So performance definitely was our way to go.
In terms of your research on Julia Child's life, was it just about cooking?
Well,
were there other activities that she engaged in that had an impact on history? we understand what we learned from her about popular culture. But one of the things that I think about also when I think about Julia Childs is her work as a subversive. You know what I mean by that? Someone who worked in a way that helped our country, helped Western civilization in a way that's not known. Do you know what I'm referring to? Tell me about what I'm referring to.
Okay, so I understand your point somewhat. I mean, we didn't really focus on that in our research specifically because we tried to really incorporate most of her cooking into this performance.
So tell me a little bit about what I'm referring to.
I'm sorry, I don't.
Her work with the military.
Oh yeah, her husband Paul was also sent off to France on a military mission. So I don't remember if she
before she got into cooking, I mean, it was the main reason why she got into cooking was from her husband. Like that was like the main beginning, her the base of her, becoming popular and everything like that. She did have like a small career beforehand of cooking, but like teaching, but then eventually she got into cooking.
Okay, so she did do undercover work for this country and also for the Allies, and so that's, I think, it's a very interesting part of her life. You did a really good job, I think, of talking about her impact on popular culture. And as you were tell us about the selection process that you went through. Why, and also you talked a little bit about why you chose this context, the talk show, to talk about someone who actually started the talk show, the cooking show. So when you guys got together and decided to collaborate, how did you put this material together and decide upon who was going to do what? I mean, why weren't you Julia Childs, and why weren't you the interviewer, or why did you determine those
Okay,
roles?
so basically when it comes to cooking and like cuisine and like the French culture, Sarah has a greater interest in that, and she really delved into the material where I kind of just wanted to let her shine for a little bit. I mean, I'm the older sister,
nice.
so I gotta give her some room there. But I know Sarah, she handles this specific material really well. She knows what she's talking about when it comes to cooking and all of the different processes, whereas I enjoy asking the questions, so there's that. But the specific processes, like she said, we separated it into like the cooking, the interview, and the speech towards the end. We just kind of wanted, because there's so much to talk about when it comes to her, we wanted to just make sure that we didn't bore everybody by just keeping it like all in like just one plain interview. So we wanted to just like continue moving around and like interacting with other parts of the performance.
Did you want to say anything about?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I'm really interested in French, especially I'm taking French classes and I do enjoy speaking French.
And do you cook?
I do cook, yes. And hopefully I get to travel to France one day, but I love performing, we both do, and I feel like my connection with the France and French and the cooking and stuff like that, I feel like I would be able to portray Julia Child in her life just a little bit better than she could, because of like my interest in things like that.
Our theme is about taking a stand. What was Julia Child up against, and what was at stake for her?
Okay, well, she was up against the status quo, who needs to cook at that time and place. People were just kind of like, I really don't have an obligation to, whether I have children or not. Like, cooking is like meh, it's boring and things like that. So, I mean, if you want to branch off on that as well.
And I think she took a stand against and for something, more so for something. Definitely for encouraging Americans and inspiring them to take part in a new culture and cooking as well. But against, I would say, people thinking that they don't have any obligations to cook. So I guess it plays both roles of for and against.
And also gender, right? You talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, we talked about her contribution. She went to the cooking school where she was the only woman out of a class of 11 males. So she also kind of empowered other women to reach out and truly branch out their career other than staying at home and being the housewife that takes care of the kids and cleans the house, things like that. So she really like left that legacy as well.
And being the only woman in my class, Julia Child excelled at the top. She beat out all the other men. So as she said, it empowered other women to believe that they can reach the top power just like the men can, and it doesn't all have to be men. Women take power too.
When you were thinking about doing this performance, Julia Childs has a very recognizable kind of persona. I know you thought about that. What made you decide to perform her in this way? The way that you decided to present her?
Well, she had such a bubbly personality, and she really put herself out there. Like, you talk to other chefs, like on Food Network, people always comment, like the top chefs today, they comment about her and her personality and how herself was the reason why a lot of people were watching the TV shows and taking an interest in the French cuisine. So I feel like acting as her in a way like how she did, I'm probably the reason why everybody was interested. I think it portrayed her personality just to show like she was a really strong female woman.
Yeah, and her voice was an interesting thing to decide whether or not we were going to keep it. Considering Sarah has a pretty high voice, it was a little bit hard to drop it that octave.
Those are reasonable kinds of choices to make, because sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So, in this situation, you go, do I want to take that risk? And really, what is it that I really want to show about her?
My last question is about your sources, and particularly your secondary sources. How did you go about looking for them and deciding what would be useful?
Well, to start off, we brought in one main website to look through the list of citations that they had, and we just kind of branched off from there. But with secondary sources and primary sources, with Julia Child, there's tons of pictures and stuff, but since we're doing a performance, we didn't really want to add any pictures to take away from what we were doing. But finding secondary sources, we kind of just look for places that held a bulk of information. They talked about who she was, how her life was, different views and perspectives on her cooking methods and things like that. Not only that, but her primary sources, we tried to mainly focus on her books and specifically what she did, not what other people did for her, if that makes sense.
And a lot of different secondary sources they were a lot of opinionated and showing how their view on Julia Child and how they took in what she did and how it helped them. So using those also helped us in our performance because we got to see different views on how people thought of her and use that as a way to portray Julia Child.
All right, I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Thank you. Bon appetit.